The summons. The stars glittered like scattered diamonds against the velvet expanse of space. The Obsidian, a sleek human vessel, cut through the void with purpose, its destination the stuff of both legend and controversy, the Galactic Assembly. Captain Alara Voss stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the looming structure that housed the assembly. It was a feat of alien engineering, a megastructure that dwarfed even the largest human constructs. Yet Alara felt no awe, only a grim determination. They had been summoned. As the Obsidian slipped into the designated docking bay, Alara turned to her first officer, Commander Zephyr Hale. "Prepare the away team. Let's show these Xenos what humanity is made of." Zephyr nodded, his jaw set. "Aye, Captain, they won't know what hit them." The grand hall of the assembly was a riot of alien forms. The chitinous Krauthar clacked their mandibles in agitation, while the gaseous Zolari swirled in iridescent patterns. The furred and scaled races eyed each other warily across the divide. And then the humans arrived. A ripple of unease spread through the gathered species as Alara strode into the hall, flanked by Zephyr and a phalanx of armored marines. Murmurs rose like the buzzing of angry insects. At the center podium, the Mosgath speaker, Azarath Kern, raised a tentacle for silence. "The assembly recognizes the human delegation," it burbled through a translator. "State your purpose." Alara mounted the steps, her boots ringing on the alien metal. She surveyed the hall, her gaze unflinching. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Assembly," she began, with a formality that bordered on mockery. "I come bearing a message from the United Earth Federation." The murmurs crescendoed into a cacophony before Azarath Kern silenced them once more. "Speak, human, we will hear your message." Alara allowed herself a small, cold smile. "It is quite simple. For centuries, you have expanded your reach across the galaxy. You have subjugated and enslaved countless species in the name of your so-called assembly. You thought yourselves the undisputed masters of the cosmos." She paused, letting her words hang in the air. "But there is one species you have not yet tried to conquer, one species that has been watching and preparing. Humanity has no interest in joining your little club. We do not seek your approval or your friendship. What we offer is a warning." Azarath Kern leaned forward, its faceted eyes glinting. "And what, pray tell, are you warning us of?" Alara's smile widened. "Of us. Of what will happen when you inevitably decide that humanity needs to be brought to heel." She stepped back, her gaze sweeping the hall once more. "Consider this your first and only warning. We are waiting for you, and when you come, you will face a force unlike any you have ever known, the fury of Earth unleashed." With that, she turned on her heel and strode from the podium, her marines falling into step behind her. The assembly erupted into a frenzy of shouting and gesticulating. But Alara paid them no heed. The message had been delivered, the rest was up to them. As the Obsidian detached from the assembly and plunged back into the star-speckled void, Alara allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The game was afoot. The galaxy would soon learn the true might of humanity. They had been warned, ripples of unease. In the wake of the human delegation's departure, the Galactic Assembly descended into chaos. The Grand Hall echoed with the clamor of 100 different species, each trying to make sense of the dire warning. "Insolence," roared Kraxar, the Krauthar representative, his mandibles clacking furiously. "These upstarts dare to threaten the assembly." Zolari emissary Xyrus pulsed with agitated colors. "We must not be hasty," it cautioned, its melodic voice rising above the din. The humans spoke with a certainty that cannot be ignored. Azarath Kern, the Mosgath speaker, raised its tentacles for order. Gradually, the tumult subsided. "The humans' words are troubling," it admitted, "but we must not let fear guide our actions." "Fear," scoffed the Skari Archon Vrezox, his scaled features twisted into a sneer. "The Skari do not fear these soft, fleshy creatures. I say we teach them their place." A chorus of agreement rose from the more militant factions, while others exchanged uneasy glances. Amidst the arguing and posturing, a lone figure watched in silence. Xyloth, the ancient Chronax sage, had seen the rise and fall of countless empires. He had witnessed the folly of pride and the bitter price of underestimation. As the debate raged on, Xyloth's thoughts turned to the humans. He had long observed their progress from afar, marveling at their tenacity and ingenuity. Where other species saw weakness, he saw potential. The assembly, he realized, had grown complacent in its power. It had forgotten the lessons of history, the dangers of hubris. The humans, with their bold defiance, had shaken the very foundations of the galactic order. Rising from his seat, Xyloth's voice cut through the clamor like a beam of light through the darkest nebula. "Heed me, assembly," he intoned, his ancient eyes sweeping the hall. "The path we choose now will echo through the ages." The hall fell silent, all eyes turning to the venerated sage. "The humans have issued a challenge, not just to our strength, but to our very way of life. They have looked upon our deeds and found us wanting." Xyloth's gaze pierced the assembly, his words heavy with the weight of prophecy. "We stand at a crossroads. One path leads to war, to a conflagration that will consume us all. The other leads to a future we cannot yet see, but one that will be shaped by the choices we make today." He raised a gnarled hand, his voice ringing with authority. "I urge you, do not let pride blind you to the truth. The humans are not to be trifled with. They possess a strength we have yet to fathom." With that, Xyloth sat back down, his words hanging in the air like a pronouncement of doom. The assembly, for once, was speechless. The weight of the decision before them settled like a leaden shroud. In the end, it was Azarath Kern who broke the silence. "We will deliberate on this matter further," it declared, its voice heavy with the burden of leadership. "The assembly will reconvene in one cycle's time." As the representatives dispersed, a palpable tension hung in the air. The ripples of humanity's warning had spread, and the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what the tide would bring. In the depths of space, the Obsidian raced towards home, carrying with it the spark that would ignite a new era. The chess pieces were in motion, and the game had only just begun. The calm before the storm. In the days following the human delegation's appearance, the Galactic Assembly found itself mired in a tense and uneasy peace. The echoes of Alara Voss's warning still reverberated through the halls of power, setting teeth on edge and fraying nerves. Behind closed doors, the leaders of the various species met in tense conclaves, debating the best course of action. Some, like the bellicose Skari and the prideful Kralthar, advocated for swift and decisive action against the upstart humans. Others, swayed by Xyloth's dire warnings, urged caution and restraint. Amidst the political maneuvering and saber-rattling, a quiet but feverish preparation was underway. The Assembly's military forces, long accustomed to easy conquests and unchallenged dominance, began to mobilize. Warships were refitted and rearmed, troops drilled in new tactics, and spies dispatched to gather intel on the mysterious humans. Yet even as the Assembly girded itself for a possible confrontation, there were those who sought a different path. A small faction, led by the Zolari emissary Xyrus and the Mozgath speaker Azarath Kern, worked tirelessly behind the scenes to open a dialogue with humanity. "We must not let fear and pride drive us to rash action," Xyrus implored in a secret meeting. "The humans have shown themselves to be a formidable and resolute species. Surely there is a way to coexist peacefully." Azarath Kern, its tentacles writhing thoughtfully, nodded in agreement. "The sage Xyloth was right. We stand at a precipice. One misstep could plunge us into an abyss from which there may be no return." Together, the Peace Faction crafted a plan to reach out to the humans, to seek common ground and mutual understanding. They knew it was a risky gambit. The hardliners in the Assembly would surely oppose any overture of friendship. But they also knew that the alternative, a war with an unknown and unpredictable foe, was a path too terrible to contemplate. As the delicate dance of diplomacy played out in the shadows, the rest of the Assembly continued its preparations for war. Fleets of ships gathered at strategic points, bristling with weapons and thrumming with barely contained aggression. Armies of warriors, honed to a razor's edge, awaited the command to strike. And all the while, the humans watched and waited, their silence speaking volumes. The Obsidian, now safely back in Earth's orbit, stood as a stark reminder of the warning they had delivered. The galaxy held its breath, poised on the knife edge of destiny. Ilara Voss, standing on the bridge of her ship, gazed out at the stars with a grim determination. She knew, as did all of humanity, that the true test was yet to come. The calm before the storm was nearing its end. "They think they know what they're up against," she murmured to herself, her eyes hard as flint. "They have no idea." She turned to her crew, her voice ringing with a steely resolve. "Ready yourselves. When the storm breaks, we will be the ones left standing." The crew responded with a roar of approval, their spirits kindled by their captain's indomitable will. And so, as the galaxy teetered on the brink of war, humanity stood ready, united in the face of the oncoming tempest. The Assembly, in all its might and arrogance, was about to learn the true meaning of human determination. The calm was ending. The storm was about to begin, hell unleashed. The Assembly fleet, a vast armada of warships from a dozen different species, surged into human space like a tidal wave of metal and fire. At its head was the scary dreadnought Vorzanth, a monstrous vessel bristling with enough firepower to reduce whole planets to ash. On the bridge of the Vorzanth, Archon Vrezox lounged in his command chair, his scaled lips curled in a smirk of anticipated triumph. "These humans will learn the price of defiance," he gloated to his subordinates. "We will crush them like the insects they are." But as the fleet plunged deeper into human territory, a creeping unease began to take hold. The expected resistance, the desperate flurry of outmatched human ships, never materialized. Instead, the Assembly forces were met with an eerie, unnerving silence. "Where are they?" hissed Kraxar, the Kralthar admiral, his mandibles twitching with agitation. "Have the cowards fled before our might?" Vrezox, his confidence beginning to fray at the edges, barked orders for the fleet to press on. They would hunt down the humans and make an example of them, even if they had to scour every system in the quadrant. But then, without warning, all hell broke loose. From the depths of asteroid belts and the shadows of nebulae, human ships emerged like avenging angels. Their sleek, black hulls seemed to absorb the very light around them, making them almost impossible to target. And their weapons. The Assembly had never seen anything like them. Lances of pure energy sliced through shields and hulls like a scalpel through flesh. Swarms of drones, moving with a deadly, coordinated precision, overwhelmed point defenses and ripped into the vulnerable guts of the alien ships. In a matter of moments, the proud Assembly fleet was reduced to a floundering mess of shattered hulks and spinning debris. The Vorzanth, its once mighty frame now a twisted ruin, drifted helplessly, its crew screaming in terror and disbelief. Ilara Voss, her eyes cold and merciless, watched the carnage unfold from the bridge of the Obsidian. This was the moment humanity had been preparing for, the day when they would unleash the full fury of their wrath upon the arrogant aliens who had dared to threaten them. "No mercy," she said softly, her voice as hard as the vacuum of space. "No quarter. They wanted a fight, and by God, we'll give them one." Across the battlefield, human ships pressed their advantage with a ruthless efficiency. The Assembly forces, once so confident in their invincibility, were now scrambling in desperate retreat. But there would be no escape. Like a pack of wolves culling a herd of deer, the humans harried the fleeing aliens, picking off stragglers and sowing chaos in their ranks. The once mighty Assembly fleet was reduced to a broken shambles, its survivors limping back towards their own space, their dreams of conquest shattered beyond repair. In the aftermath of the battle, as the wreckage of alien ships drifted like macabre confetti against the backdrop of the stars, Ilara allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The Assembly had been given a bloody nose, a painful lesson in the consequences of underestimating humanity. But she knew this was only the beginning. The Assembly, wounded and enraged, would surely seek revenge. The path ahead would be long and hard, fraught with danger and sacrifice. But in that moment, as the Obsidian sailed through the debris field of its vanquished foes, Ilara felt a surge of fierce, defiant pride. Humanity had drawn a line in the stars, and the galaxy would forever remember the day it learned the true meaning of human resolve. Hell had been unleashed, and the universe would never be the same. Desperate measures. In the wake of their catastrophic defeat, the Galactic Assembly was a seething cauldron of fear, rage, and bitter recrimination. The once proud alien races, their confidence shattered by the human onslaught, turned on each other in a frenzy of blame and accusation. In the Grand Hall, the recriminations flew like poisoned darts. The Skari and the Kralthar, their fleets decimated and their warriors humbled, demanded blood vengeance against the humans. The Zolari and the Mozgath, their calls for caution now vindicated, pleaded for a more measured response. Amidst the chaos, Xyloth the Sage stood as a lone voice of reason. "We have sown the wind," he intoned, his ancient eyes heavy with sorrow, "and now we reap the whirlwind. The humans have shown us the folly of our arrogance." But few heeded his words. The assembly, riven by fear and wounded pride, seemed poised on the brink of fracture. Some called for a grand counteroffensive, a marshalling of all the galaxy's might to crush the human menace once and for all. Others, their faith in the assembly's power broken, advocated for a desperate sue for peace. In the end, it was a third option that carried the day. A cabal of the assembly's most ruthless and cunning leaders, led by the enigmatic Korthax of the Shadowkith, proposed a different path, one of shadows and subterfuge. "The humans have proven too strong to confront directly," Korthax purred, his voice a sibilant whisper. "But there are other ways to bring a foe to their knees." The plan was as insidious as it was desperate. Spies and saboteurs, trained in the art of infiltration and subversion, would be inserted into human society. They would sow discord and confusion, undermining humanity's unity and resolve from within. At the same time, the assembly would work to isolate the humans diplomatically, cutting off their potential allies and leaving them vulnerable. Bribes, threats, and manipulation would be brought to bear, all with the aim of weakening humanity's position in the galactic stage. It was a plan born of desperation and fear, a far cry from the Assembly's former confidence and swagger. But it was also a plan that played to their strengths, the ability to work in the shadows, to strike at an enemy's weakest points. As the plan was set in motion, a pall of uncertainty and dread settled over the Assembly. They had set in motion a great game, one whose outcome was far from certain. The humans had proven themselves a formidable foe. Would these desperate measures be enough to bring them to heel? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain: the galaxy had entered a new era, one where the old rules no longer applied. The age of human ascendancy had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. As the Assembly's spies and agents slipped into the shadows, ready to begin their work of subversion and sabotage, the galaxy held its breath. The next move belonged to the humans, and the fate of the stars themselves hung in the balance. A new galactic order. The Galactic Assembly's covert efforts to undermine humanity were as subtle as they were insidious. Spies wormed their way into positions of influence, whispering poisoned words into receptive ears. Agents provocateurs stirred up unrest and dissent, seeking to fracture humanity's unity. But they had underestimated their foe. Humanity, tempered by the fires of conflict and united by a shared sense of purpose, proved more resilient than the Assembly had ever imagined. The whispers of discord fell on deaf ears. The seeds of division found no fertile soil in which to grow. And all the while, humanity continued to build its strength. Their fleets patrolled the stars. Their technology advanced by leaps and bounds. They forged alliances with those species who had grown weary of the Assembly's heavy-handed rule, forming a coalition of the willing that spanned the galaxy. Faced with this growing tide of resistance, the Assembly grew ever more desperate. They lashed out with increasingly brazen acts of aggression, hoping to cow the humans and their allies into submission. But each act of violence only served to harden humanity's resolve and rally more species to their cause. Finally, with their schemes in tatters and their power crumbling, the Assembly was left with no choice but to sue for peace. A delegation was sent to the humans, bearing an offer of truce and negotiation. The meeting took place on neutral ground. a small, uninhabited planet on the edge of assembly space. The human delegation, led by the formidable ambassador Zara Kion, arrived in a show of quiet strength, their ships gleaming in the light of the alien sun. Across the table sat the assembly representatives, their once proud bearing now replaced by an air of defeat and trepidation. They had come to bargain, to salvage what they could from the ruins of their former dominance. But Zara Kion had not come to negotiate. She had come to dictate terms. "The age of the Assembly's tyranny is over," she declared, her voice ringing with the weight of history. "Humanity and all free species will no longer tolerate your oppression and aggression." She laid out her terms, each one a hammer blow to the Assembly's pride. Humanity would take its place as a major power in the galaxy, equal to any other. The Assembly would dismantle its vast war machine, submitting to strict limits on its military might. And the species that had suffered under the Assembly's yoke would be granted full autonomy and self-determination. The Assembly representatives, their faces ashen, had no choice but to accept. They signed the accord with trembling hands, knowing that their days of dominance were over. As the human delegation departed, Zara Kion stood on the observation deck of her flagship, gazing out at the stars. She knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges and threats, new enemies to face and old grudges to overcome. But she also knew that humanity had proven itself equal to the task. They had stood against the might of the Assembly and emerged victorious, not just through strength of arms, but through the power of their indomitable spirit. A new era had dawned, one in which humanity would take its rightful place among the stars. The galaxy would never be the same, but perhaps, Zara mused, that was no bad thing. The future stretched out before them, a vast and uncharted expanse full of infinite possibilities, and humanity, united and unbowed, stood ready to meet it head-on. The age of the Assembly had ended. The age of humanity had just begun.